Aeronautical Society. Today's date is May 22nd, 2013. Our special guest today is Charlie N. Craigmile. And Charlie, we're really excited and really pleased that you're here today. We want to talk to you a little bit about your life's history prior to you coming to Attica, and then obviously some of your history as far as World War II is concerned. So let's start out by right from the beginning. Where were you born, Charlie?
I was born in Skaneateles Junction, which is, the junction was a railroad stop because my father was station agent on the New York Central Railroad. So I was born in Skaneateles Junction, north of Skaneateles.
And how'd you wind up in Attica? Tell us about your family.
Well, my father, as I said, was on the New York Central as a telegrapher, and he had lots of years service, and so he pretty much picked the jobs that he wanted. So when he came, well, he worked for the Central Railroad in Michigan before coming east, and his boss told him to come east, he'd give him a job. So he came here, came to Montezuma, bought a farm, and found out that there wasn't any job on the railroad. So he farmed it a little bit and hauled coal and did whatever he could to keep going. And my sister, of course, was born out in Wisconsin, and so when he moved he sold the farm, but he took back the mortgage. And when he moved to Skaneateles Junction, and that's where I was born. Well, the guy that bought the farm couldn't keep up his payments, so my father took the farm back, and that's how we got back into Montezuma. So I lived in Montezuma, went to country school, one-room schoolhouse, Minton School District. The building's still there, it's not a school anymore. And we had 7 grades in the Minton District. And I went from there to 7th grade in Port Byron. Okay. And then when my dad came to Attica, I came with him, and I was supposed to go into the 8th grade here in Attica, but I didn't have the qualifications, so I had to go 7th and 8th grade in 1 year. And worked out, so.
And you have the one sister you mentioned?
I beg your pardon?
You have just one sister?
I had just one sister, yeah.
Then obviously you graduated from Prospect Street School here in Attica?
Graduated in 1940, yeah, from Attica High School over here. And I played in the orchestra there, and there's a picture of the Attica band. I also played in the Attica band, played a saxophone. And yeah, and then when I graduated in 1940, the day that I graduated, I was 17 years old. That was my birthday. And back in those days, you couldn't get a job until you were 18. So I was faced with, what am I going to do? So I took a postgraduate course at Attica. Thank God, typing in shorthand. I never used the shorthand, but I used the typing a lot later in life. And then about mid-year in that, I went to Buffalo Aeronautical, up at Buffalo Airport, because they were having an aeronautical course where they taught people to work on aircrafts and do aircraft sorts of things. I got that lead from a fellow by the name of Bob North. Bob North's mother was a school teacher up in Bennington, and a good friend of mine, which would become my mother-in-law, Marion Foote, later. So anyhow, he worked up there, and he suggested I do that. So I went to Buffalo Aeronautical, and it was, the hangar is still there, and it was right next to the experimental hangar of Curtiss-Wright Corporation. And that was really nice, because I went there, and the day I graduated, the day I became 18, I could go to work, and the guy that ran the experimental department at Curtiss-Wright offered me a job. So I went to work the day I was 18 as a aircraft engine mechanic.
Would that be where you'd like to show us the picture
Well,
of the plane?
yeah, I was crew chief. I was crew chief on the in the experimental department, but I was crew chief on the third shift, so I wasn't the top man. But this is a picture of the first P-40F that was ever built, and I stayed with Curtiss-Wright until 1943, and then in Attica in those days, all that in the group that I got to know, there was only 3 of us left. Ely Spink, whose dad was a farmer out on the Crick Road, and Eddie Youngers, who I don't think he had a father. I think he took care of his mother and delivered paper. He was very ambitious, but he was working for the railroad.
Oh.
So Eddie Youngers was deferred. Ely Spink was deferred. I was deferred because I worked for Curtiss-Wright. We didn't have to go to the service, but we got all drunked up one night and decided that we'd volunteer for the draft, and Eddie Youngers did, and so did I. Eddie Youngers did go to Europe, worked for the railroads, and I went into the Air Force. Ely Spink's father talked him out of it because he needed him on the farm to work. So,
Well, then tell us where you went for basic training. And what branch of the service was it?
Well, I went to basic training in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I had a good life before I went into the service, so I weighed over 200 pounds. And Greensboro was hot, and they had a friggin' track down there that they ran us around. And I got down to quite a few pounds. Then we went from there to up to Pennsylvania, to Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to train to be officers and gentlemen. And so I went up there as a squad leader, and at that time we'd get done with our duties at noon on Saturday, and we didn't have to be back until bed check on Sunday. So I'd leave. I was going with Evelina Foote here in town, and so I would leave there and hitchhike home, and lots of times I wouldn't get home until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and take Evelina out, and we would go to East Aurora to a place called the Barn, as I remember it, and party, and then get home, get her home. Her father wasn't very pleased with that, but and then the next morning, Sunday morning, my father would take me to Arcade, and I catch the B&O Railroad, which took me back down to Harrisburg, and I'd get into Carlisle just before bed check, so I was all set.
Now tell us about this picture. Is this part of basic,
Well,
or was
this
this later? What is this?
This is a picture that was taken, this was taken in 1944.
So you've been in a couple years by
Yeah,
that time.
1944. When I was in, and it's taken at 38 Genesee Street, right here in Attica. And, well, when I went into the service, and into training and so forth, the next step after Dickinson College was to go to the West Coast to pre-flight, and that's when we got washed out by
I'm sure we can't really read
General
this.
Blount, I think his name was.
We can't
General
read that, I'm
Blount.
sure, but at least it'll show us that they did
Yeah.
give you some notification, some official.
He washed us all out, I think there were 5,000 of us, because, well, the war was winding down in Europe, and they needed gunners and things like that. So I went from there to Las Vegas. Well, we went to Amarillo, Texas, and in the service. If you've never been in the service, it's hard to understand, but in the service, they threaten you with all kinds of things. So they threatened us with being transferred to the infantry. So 5 of us, a group of us, got together and went up and saw the commander at Amarillo and said, we want to volunteer for the infantry, knowing rightly that the Army never lets you do what you want to do. And so they didn't. They sent us to gunnery school in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so I went to gunnery school. I washed out of gunnery school because I had a hearing problem. And then I was transferred. I got a delay en route, and I was transferred to the Air Transport Command at Hamilton Field. But I came home in the meanwhile. This is 1944 when that picture was taken. And I got engaged. Evelina Foote and I became engaged. And then I went back to San Francisco. Oh dear, I can't remember the name of the airfield, but I was there in San Francisco for a while, and then transferred up to north of California to anyhow, shipped out of a port north of there.
Fort Lewis, maybe? Fort Lewis, Washington?
No, it
No?
wasn't that. What, I just
Yeah.
can't recall. We shipped out of there. I remember when we shipped out, we went in a zigzag trip 13 days to go to the Hawaiian Islands. And I got to the Hawaiian Islands, to Hickam Field, and at Hickam Field there was they had a room set up for training, and there was a thing on the bulletin board that said that a aircraft and engine mechanics course was being taught on the following Monday. So I searched out the lieutenant who was in charge, and I said, I'd like to come to the school. And he said, what are your qualifications? And I told him about what I've done at Curtiss-Wright and so forth and so on. So he said, yeah, come Monday, you're in the class. So I came Monday, and he said, you're the instructor. And I became the instructor. Well, as I say, the war was winding down in Europe, so I had a lot of master sergeants, tech sergeants, all those high-ranking guys that were coming down to the Pacific Theater. And the only thing I had to work with, I had an old B-18 bomber there, and I taught aircraft and engine mechanics for, probably 3 or 4 weeks. And then I was selected, they picked 5 of us, and I was selected to go somewhere to open an air base. We didn't know where. So, but kind of an interesting aside, and I don't know how long you want me to
It's
go
good,
into.
just keep going.
Kind of an interesting aside, when I was in the Hawaiian Islands, I became friends with a soldier from Louisiana, New Orleans. Gus Flatman, his name was. And Gus, of course, Bill, growing up in New Orleans, knew a lot about fishing and stuff in the ocean that I didn't know about. So he said,